सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The Shanghai Cooperation Organization or SCO foreign ministers meeting in Goa has produced the usual photo ops and probably even some important outcomes in backroom conversations. It should also make us reflect at the same time on the proliferation of similar multilateral organizations, what they stand for and what they mean for India. As the name indicates, Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a China-inspired and whatever the pretense, China-led organization. Look at two others that have come up lately, more or less in the same era, the past 2 decades. The BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa Forum and RIC, that is Russia, India and China. Both forums have come up in the same period. 3 countries are common to these forums. All 3 forums have 3 countries that are common to these: China, Russia and India. The common factor in all 3 forums is the preeminence of China, which is the reason we have listed India as the last of the 3. We know all governments love the razzmatazz of symmetry and the Modi government revels in it more than any, probably since Indira Gandhi's. But the downside of participating with such enthusiasm in 3 regional groupings led and dominated by China, with Russia as its loyal follower, has to be debated. In fact, that's the reason we just told you we had put India at number 3. We also know that the buzzword these days is multilateralism. But what quality and what kind of multilateralism can be expected from China-launched and China-run organizations with a couple of its loyalists, if not near vassals, and an adversarial India? It will be triggering for many if I use the expression an isolated India. Think, however, about any of these 3 organizations. China and Russia are now fully hyphenated. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov can speak at a high-powered intellectual hangout in Delhi, that is Observer Research Foundation's Raisina Dialogue, and admonish both his host, the CEO of ORF, and the Indian audience by reminding them that the only country with which they have a written strategic alliance treaty is Russia. This in a country where 3 successive prime ministers over 25 years, that is Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh and then Narendra Modi. This in a country where 3 successive prime ministers over 25 years have held another quote-unquote essential and quote-unquote natural strategic partnership, though with the US, not Russia. This SCO meeting, more than any other lately, serves to underline India's current geopolitical predicament. India is forced to spend so much time and energy, invest so much political capital and radiate fake smiles in a grouping where it has so many serious clashes of interest. It cannot stay away from Russia, which is immensely weakened now and is therefore joined at the hip with the Chinese. At the same summit, at the same tables, India would not be seen to be anything but rude with the Pakistanis. But can it afford to frown at the Chinese at the same time? It has to deliver those fake smiles. In the big picture, who is the bigger adversary right now? Who is the bigger pain in the neck for India? And who is it that's keeping more than 3,000 kilometers of our borders active, throwing our military posture and deployments into a complete imbalance? It is China, no? Since hypocrisy is central to the craft of diplomacy and no country is judged for practicing it, sleeping with the enemy might not have the same meaning as in people's personal lives or in a movie. But if multilateralism is about widening your options, this supping where China sits at the head of the table is unfortunately more an example of how these are instead becoming limited. Our strategic options, instead of widening, are becoming limited. These 3 supposedly multilateral organizations have come up in the 2 decades when both India and China were growing phenomenally. For now, China has won the race for preeminence in the extended region. India's cause is not helped by the fact that while it may have taken the lead with SARC, that is South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation, the organization has been rendered mostly defunct because of the India-Pakistan problem. If even within our immediate region, multilateral bodies only function with some sense of purpose, if they include China, it's a bummer for us as an aspiring power. I know that there is another organization called BIMSTEC that is countries to India's east, but it doesn't quite have the same weight yet as a genuine regional multilateral organization would have. Here is one way to put the SCO in perspective. So imagine if SARC, which has India as the dominating partner, expanded to include several other major nations in the region, say Thailand to the east, the Central Asian republics, the Stans as the Americans call them, Iran and Russia. Would China join such a grouping? And if so, would it still be possible for India to retain any dominance if China were to also join in? Now see how the SCO came into being. It was initially the gathering in 1996 of what was described as the Shanghai Five. Who were these five? China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. The summit in Shanghai on 26 April 1996 resulted in a treaty on deepening military trust among these five neighbors, that is China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. Any doubts about the essentially military strategic origins of the organization of the SCO were answered by what came out of the next year's summit in Moscow on 24th of April 1997, a treaty on reduction of military forces in border regions. Boris Yeltsin and Jiang Zemin then also followed up the next month in May of 1997 by signing a joint declaration on a multipolar world. The mid-90s were the peak of unipolarity, where Russia and China, still not first-rate powers, where Russia was in decline, deep decline, had suffered great setbacks and China had not yet risen. They were both desperate to create a burrow of their own, immune from American/Western influence. This, when from the second half of P.V. Narasimha Rao's tenure onwards, is precisely when India started looking westwards. On to Vajpayee and through Manmohan Singh, and then to Narendra Modi, the movement was in that direction. Now, nostalgia for the non-aligned years is back in India, probably as an instinctive reaction to the Western institutions and government's criticism and questioning of Modi government's record on human rights, civil liberties and the minorities, and also many of these ratings by Western agencies and organizations. The revived suspicion of the West has brought multilateralism back in fashion. Funnily, the only places where we seek refuge now for multilateralism are the organizations China founded or dominates. That is the problem with the SCO, BRICS, RIC, that is Russia, India, China Forum, and all the organizations Lavrov had reminded us of at that ORF conference. What compounds the problem is that over the decades, India has failed even to build a regional forum of its own to create a sense of a geopolitically limited multilateralism, because however limited it might be, it will be a forum that India will lead. These bodies, the SCO in particular, given its military strategic priorities and origins, do not help India's quest for strategic autonomy. On the contrary, they only limit it. Today, if you have Russia and China sitting at the same table with you, you know which friendship is stronger. That is your friendship with Russia stronger, or is Russia's friendship with China stronger? And which relationship is adversarial? On that table, it's the India-China relationship that is adversarial. Together, they constrain India's options on the groupings where its current interests lie, the Quad for example. To have your best friend of 6 decades as not just the new essential strategic ally of your most significant adversary and even dependent on it is a bummer. It also exposes India's most painful vulnerability on military equipment. To be fair, you can't blame Narendra Modi or Jai Shankar for this, because they did not dig this hole, nor did they walk India into it. They have to navigate a way out of it though. or at the very least, buy a decade of relative peace and stability, but not by bartering one half of India's strategic autonomy for the sake of the other.